So, welcome to this session. It's about dependencies and how to make them evident. So I actually got this idea reading the book from Adam Berger, and he had a chapter on dependencies. And so, as the curious person that I am, I decided to look into the subject. And these are the things that I discovered. I would like to just share them with you. So if possible, I try to answer any questions on the spot. If it's not possible, we just can take that off time and we can discuss it later on. Okay, so this is the agenda for this morning. First up, dev to ops, you're doing it wrong. And what I wanted to do was really go back to the basics of TDD, because like my friends just showed me, I'm all about using PESTER for operation validation. But actually, PESTER is really more than just for operation validation. You can use it, it's primarily used for TDD. And that's test-driven design. Thank you. So, dependencies for a better code. We're going to go through some examples, how you can make those dependencies evident, and just make sure that your code is more better and reliant. Then we're going to go through the arrange, act, and assert. You're probably doing that already when you're creating your scripts, but you probably haven't given it that label. And we got into some demos and comments. All right, dev to ops, you're doing it wrong. So why are we ops having a hard time getting it? So how many of you guys are using PESTER for rigorous engineering and precision? Okay, so you get it. I'm still working on that. Now, PESTER really started making sense for me once I understood the operation validation part. But it turns out that the developers weren't too giddy on the ops guys using their tool the wrong way. Sure, it gets the job done, but that's not really what it's for. We can agree to disagree on that, but I get where the devs are coming from. So why are we having such a hard time getting it? Why bother then? So, speaking as an ops guy, I find the assertion part quite useful. Maybe not as a full-fledged developer, but there are definitely parts that we as ops can use, right? And if we're using it right, well, I'll just leave that in the middle. But ops could definitely stand to learn a few things from devs. For devs, it's all about being able to refactor their code and still make everything work as expected. I'll be sure to get into a small demonstration of that right about after this session, after this slide. So let's just go back to basics then. When you think about TDD, what is a unit code? What is a unit of code? So that's an isolated collection of code, and a code that can be tested without loading or running the entire application. So, in other words, think of a function. That's really where you have just one function, and it's good to have a function that does one thing and one thing only. So, what is a test? Test is just code whose purpose is to verify other code. And test cases are a set of input that you can use for function calls and assertions about the expected output, which either passes or fails. And a unit test is just an assertion about a unit of code. So, what makes for a good test? Now, all these questions here are viable, not only for devs, but also for ops. Is the assertion verifiable? Is the test coherent? Are the inputs and outputs precisely specified? And is the test readable? And is it maintainable? That's also another aspect. Are error cases considered? And is it providing value, or is it more trouble than it's worth? So I'll get into a small demo about TDD, bear with me. But this was really a fun exercise. I got this exercise from Doug Fink after I got trolled on social media. And I just thought, I really don't just get the whole TDD experience. Why should I really care about it? So he gave me an exercise, which I'd like to share with you guys at the moment. Wait a minute. Let me see. Oh, that's not working today. Oh, right. Thank you. And then click. Oh, oops, my bad. Again. Oh. Sorry about that. Okay. Well, guys, I tried with the button. Let's just go back to display settings. Not extend. I'm going to duplicate now.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not doing what you want.
Once again.
Is your cable?
Yes, yes.
Go back to the display thing.
Yes. Oh, duplicate.
There you go. Ah.
Okay, keep changes. Ah, all right. All right. So, oh, let me just zoom in. Can you read it in the back? Yeah? Okay. Or just a little bit more? So, this was a function I got from Doug to create and to reset the get largest number. So it would take a set of numbers and return the largest number. So what I'll do first is just run the whole script, and then we'll just talk about that part that you need to refactor. So the first test that I did, if you look at the names, given a set of numbers, it should return the largest number from that set. And what I did was I used int 32 as the maximum number of the set. Now, that's the test cases that I have here. I have a subset of test cases. One of them here has the maximum number from the int 32. And what I did was the test case with largest number overflow. So just added one number to that maximum number. And what would happen in that case is that you would get an error. Oops. And it says right here that the number is either too large or too small for int32. So the way that you would actually do with TDD is that you want to refactor your code. And the simplest way to do that for this function was that I just refactored it and made the function int64, which is here. So I just created the function again just to let you see the differences between both of the codes. One is 32 and one is 64. And when you run the function again with the max capacity, you see that this time it passes. So that is really the beauty of test cases and refactoring your code. If you need to change something in your code and you just want to make sure that the code will generate what you expected. And that makes for more reliable refactoring of your code. And granted, as ops guys, we are using scripts to create, to just do the heavy lifting. But if you're in a team and you have to share your code and your colleague has to refactor your code, then you definitely have to think about unit testing and unit code testing. All right. Oh, he went back to all of the slides. Let's just go back. So, for the next demo then, so what we're actually going to do, we're going to use something near and dear to my heart again. We're going to use Azure AD to create users from a CSV file and an XML file. So how many of you guys have been playing with Azure and Azure AD? Yes, okay. So this is it's going to be a fun exercise. There were quite a few assumptions that I made about Azure AD that weren't quite evident to me, but I would like to just carry you through the things that I found, and maybe it's helpful for you when you go back to work with Azure as well. And then it's the arrange, act, and assert part, something that you're probably doing already, but we'll get into that as well, and the dependencies that you can set up. Okay, so this is demo time. Let's see. Okay, so this works now. Nice. Okay, so first things first, I already connected to the network, did my Active Directory credentialer part. My first assumption was thinking that Azure AD commandlets and the parameters thereof are equivalent to your your Active Directory commandlets. They are not. So here's what the total parameter set looks like from Azure AD. There are about 29 parameters. You can actually do the same for Active Directory, and there are about 55, I guess. I did it in another session. And these are the mandatory parameters for Azure AD. So that was quite surprising to me. I thought, oh, we need the SAM account name or the name as mandatory, but that isn't the case. So for Azure AD, you need account enabled, display name, and password profile. And password profile is something also kind of new to me, so what gives? So I decided to do a little bit more investigating and what's necessary. So I actually had a CSV file with all of the information that works for your normal AD user. And these are the headers, and see if you can recognize them. These are all valid headers for your Active Directory user, but they're not all valid for your Azure AD. So what I had here is a region to check if the CSV files have valid headers. So let's just run that. So these are the valid CSV headers in my file that are valid for the new Azure AD user. So I have to do something with the files headers if I want to use the CSV file. These are only the files, the headers that I can use on that commandlet. And here you have all of the invalid headers. If I try to add that parameter to the new Azure AD user commandlet, it won't work. Now, for this part, because we figured out and we've seen what are mandatory, and they weren't in the set when I loaded my CSV file, I'm just going to add them on the fly by doing a for each, adding the password profile object. That was something new. You can look it up in your TechNet documentation, how to create that. It's a different type. And also make sure that the account is enabled. And one of the things that you also needed was the mail nickname. And for the mail nickname, I just took the user principal name, did a split, and took the first part of that. And then just exported that to CLI XML, because the password profile isn't really just a typical string, it's really an object. And trying to export an object in CSV file doesn't really make sense, so just use an XML file. And if you use a CLI XML, you'll save all of the custom object types and output. So Let me just show you what the new user looks like now. New demo user. So as you can see, I took all of the valid parts that are necessary to create the Azure AD user, and I also created the password profile on the fly, and added the necessary parameters that were missing from my CSV file. So these are things that I would just like to give to you when you go back. If you're looking into using a commandlet, look at what's mandatory, look at the ways, the assumptions that you made about the commandlets that you're using, try to make them evident. And it would just make, how would you say, help you to minimize your error factor. So, what we like to do now is just test the validity of it all again. So now we have the password profile and the display name and account enabled to that list. And if I run the invalid file part, that should be empty. So now I know that I'm good to go. Everything is as it should be, right? So before we go into dependencies part, I would like to just do one user, just to get a feeling for that it works. I'm all about splatting, so I just created a function that would take your custom object and convert it to a hash table. And that way it makes it a lot easier to be able to splat that part. I already created one this morning. Let's just move it up one more. There you go. So I just took one entry from the new demo users, and I was able to create that user in Azure AD after doing all of the investigation of what was necessary to be able to create that account. Okay, so now here's for the dependency part. So I just exported all of the correct version and all the necessary parameters in the XML file. And what I would like to do now is look into dependencies. Now, dependencies is just an array with hash tables with necessary tests that you can run to make sure that everything is in place. That is just your arrange part of it. So define the properties, verify the XML file, verify mandatory profiles, and the valid parameters, and verify that the user can read an AD, Azure AD property. And then you have the assert part, is you can create the user. So I was pleasantly surprised that I could use the it block, but it's not really a surprise because the it is just really try and catch, but it was just decent error handling without really putting in too much effort into it. I'll just run the script the first time so you can get an idea of what happens. Of course, I created the first account. So let's just run it. Cool. So everything in magenta, these are the dependencies that are there. The module is available. The XML file that I added, that exists. And the XML file contains the mandatory parameter, account enabled, display name and password profile, and the mandatory mail nickname. And the XML contains valid parameters for the commanded new Azure AD, and the current user can read Azure AD users properties. And of course, I created that user this morning as a test. So I called the new Azure AD commandlet in the it block, and he's telling you here that there's an exception. The user already exists. But at the same time, I could verify the user properties of what was in the XML file. These are the properties. They are set to certain versions and certain values. And it's also important that you specify, or I like to have a proper description when it comes to your assertions. So I can verify the property country is set to NL or it's set to a certain value. Now, I can also run the to 6. So here you go. Creating the user in the it block. Let me just put it side by side. I created a user account in the it block, and it succeeded, no errors, and also verified all of the properties are as expected. And if I run this part again, definitely will give me an error that the user exists, but at least he also does the assertion part of the properties. Right? Whoa. So this part is really going really quick. I am sorry. I thought I had a lot more. Yeah, just to continue. Questions so far? Anyone? No? Well, this is awkward.
Did you delete all of your slides?
I did not. Man.
Do you have more tests?
Well, I do have different tests, because this is way too early for a summary. Actually, it was really about the Azure AD and the act and arrange and assert and the dependencies. Really what I wanted to give you guys with the whole dependency test is that you definitely need to understand the TDD and BDD. If you're working in a team that has to refactor code and you have to engage with each other, you should know how to work with that. And it definitely helps if you can validate your input that is precisely specified. Like we did this morning, just showed you how to go and figure out the properties and the parameters that are necessary for it. And dependencies has definitely helped me recognize the assumptions that I've made. I made the assumption that Azure AD and Active Directory are the same. They are not. And definitely if you're a tool maker, you need to understand TDD and BDD. By all means, as op guys, I know that we're just about heavy lifting and getting things done, but definitely look into it and make sure that it just adds value. And as always, we all have to have fun learning about Pester. And that is really, I'm really out of, yeah, that really went a lot quicker. I'm sorry about that. I did the test and I ran it before, but probably nerves got the better of me, that I went through too quick of my code. Yes?
Well, first of all, thank you for using Azure AD as an example.
Yes.
TDD for most analytics guys.
Yes.
It's a very normal example.
Okay.
But speaking of that, I made a lot of, for a lot of different customers, I made a lot of these new AD user, new Azure AD user scripts.
Yes.
They're always custom properties.
Yeah.
But I always check, like, does the separate parameter exist? Does this exist? Does it? I do it in like if statement loops. But would you suggest that I would do it with Pester?
Oh, okay. So the question was if you had to validate the parameters in the commandlet parameters that are necessary. should you use Pester to validate that. Like we did with the Azure AD commandlet set test that we just did, you should explore what is necessary. And then I will probably use the dependency subset that I just showed. Maybe I can go back to that. So here it's all about arranging all of the necessary dependencies for that. So once you know what is necessary, by all means, you can use this part to validate that everything is as it should be. Basically, using it in Pester, it's like once you have Pester as a tool, you probably see, and you have a hammer, you see every problem as a nail. So, it could be that you could use it, but what you're doing right now with the if statement is a good option. Yes?
So whenever you run something, you can tell that if something goes wrong, you use it because this value should be like this, and you use it.
Okay, cool. Yes. So is there a mic? Because there's a great discussion going in the back there. No worries, no worries. Maybe I should have walked to the back, yes. So definitely there are new features in Pester that I haven't tried out as yet, but the because is also a new part of it. And you can actually tell Pester why something needs to be in place. So that's definitely something I could look into. Thank you for that tip. Okay, pretty awesome. Yes?
Does it take a lot of time to actually make all the Pester things, or once you've done that once, is it easier to do this more often?
Practice makes perfect.
If I make a script, I just make a script and I'm done with it?
Yeah.
But is this something that is easy to repeat?
Well, that is the general idea. Once you have your script and once you have all of your validations in place, the idea is that you can use it and reuse it again. And definitely it's something that you can use for, let's say, if you have a junior administrator that has to create accounts. I feel pretty confident giving him this script that will help him to understand what happens and what goes wrong, instead of giving him a script that just fails or tells him that something went wrong somewhere. This would definitely help him to understand what went wrong. Yes? So here I got all of the values from Azure AD, and then for each parameter in my user properties, I'm just verifying that the parameter is set to the expected parameter value. And the actual parameter should be as the expected value. Well, guys, basically that was my presentation. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope it's something that you can use. And just what I would like to give you with the presentation is that Pester is really an awesome tool, and I hope that when you guys go back to your companies, that you will really look into it and use it for validation, but definitely if you're in a team that is creating tools, also have a look at Pester for the TDD part. Thank you.